Hi there, it's Raiderly.
I am currently rereading The Continuum Concept, which the friend who recommended it to me by saying, "This book changed me into a thinking person." What a huge recommendation for a book. So I was like, okay, I want to read that. It's really striking me in a different way rereading it 5 years later because of, one, a lot of the life experiences I've had since I first read it, and two, because the most recent book I've just read before it is The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs, which I would have never realized that these two books have a lot in common were I not reading them back to back. The Continuum Concept. The important thing to understand is the significance of evolution versus unevolved change. They are diametrical cross-purposes. For what evolving creates in the way of diversification, ever more precisely adapted to our requirements, change destroys by introducing behavior or circumstances which do not take into account the entire range of factors concerned in serving our best interests. So what she's saying here is that when something evolves naturally over time, it takes into account all of what's happened before and adds in something that makes things even more stable, more robust, by adding a little bit more diversification, adding a little bit more adaptability. In each life form, the tendency to evolve is not random, but furthers its own interests. It is directed at greater stability, that is, a greater diversity, complexity, and therefore adaptability. This is not what we call progress. In fact, resistance to change, no way in conflict with the tendency to evolve, is an indispensable force in keeping any system stable. What she's talking about here is the difference between gradual, slow evolution and abrupt, sudden changes. This really struck me in rereading it because I recently just finished reading The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. A concept she talks about over and over again in this book is about how neighborhoods become strong and robust in terms of their economics, their social structure, through a very slow evolutionary process. So basically the city evolves as, people become stable in their place. That basically the stability of the families who live in a given neighborhood are actually what give rise to the economic strength of the neighborhood. And she illustrates how projects, which decimate an area and then basically rebuild everything from scratch, actually destroy the social structure, they destroy the economic structure, and they actually create more poverty and more misery. Projects have also been shown to create a lot more crime. Part of the reason for this is that when you know your neighbors, it becomes less likely for anyone to execute a crime, because you either, even if you don't like your neighbors, you don't want to commit crimes against them because they might know it's you. Sidewalk acquaintance, even, creates a level of safety, which she goes into in detail in the book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Basically, projects, which were all about cleaning an area up and making it prettier, made things worse. And so it was really fascinating to me to find the same concept as being illustrated here, but just purely from a standpoint of evolution and how what makes a species strong is being explained here for how to make a city or an economy or a neighborhood strong. So obviously a lot of people have different definitions or concepts about what progress means, or what change means, or what evolution means. Basically there are two different concepts here. Jean Liedloff in this book is calling evolution, which is gradual, and it supports the needs of everybody. It supports the needs of the ecosystem, it supports the needs of the species, it supports the need socially and economically. Interestingly, Ishmael is all about the same concept, that when things naturally evolve, they follow a certain pattern, the certain rule of only taking what you need from the environment, and it works in a sense of harmony. But by trying to design things, like when one person says, I'm going to design a city, it creates catastrophe, just as we saw in The Life and Death of Great American Cities. And when one person tries to design a culture or how parenting is supposed to work, and they just make it up and write a book about it, we see the disasters of the 80s and 90s. Any of you who are born in that time period know, maybe you know, about all the parenting books that went around there and the disastrous notions like Ferberizing a baby. People in the continuum concept, these indigenous tribes, obviously never Ferberized their babies. They didn't leave them to cry and wail. They held them. They wanted to practice compassion and comfort naturally, and that gave rise to healthy humans naturally. This is something that, Jane Jacobs talks about evolving in cities naturally over time. And she talks about how this gets disrupted by cataclysmic influx of money when somebody comes along and they decide to take everything out and build a strip mall, which invariably leads the area neighborhood to go down in value and down in stability and up in crime. And so the other type of change is the cataclysmic change, where you decide you're going to start over, do everything again. A lot of the most great things are slow evolutionary process. If you just think about your own life, there's understandings that you come to, and some part of it may come to you in a blink, in an instant, and you completely understand it in that moment. But think about how long it takes to integrate it into your life, to find a way for all of your understandings to find balance. It's a process that never ends. You're always involved in it. And there's a quote I really love that goes, "Health is not a state to achieve, but a process to always be continually involved in." But yes, evolved in works too. Flash forward a whole nother year, and I'm rereading Ishmael, and this has been having a pretty strong impact on me. This little passage here actually brought tears to my eyes. As I say, there were many in Germany who recognized Hitler's story as rank mythology. They were nevertheless held captive by it, simply because the vast majority around them thought it sounded wonderful, and they were willing to give their lives to make it a reality. Do you see what I mean? And the guy responds, "I think so. Even if you weren't personally captivated by the story, you were captive all the same, because the people around you made you captive. You were like an animal being swept along in the middle of a stampede." Every one of us who feels that sensation of just being swept up in the stampede, but you know that what is being done in the world is not what you want to do, you know that the social status quo is not what you want to maintain, we each have the choice and the opportunity to do something different. Jean Liedloff explains that we're off our continuum. And what she means by that is that we are no longer evolving naturally in such a way that behooves us as a species. Daniel Quinn would completely agree with Jean Liedloff. He explains that we are no longer following the laws of nature, as he puts it. He says that there's a fundamental law that the whole community of nature follows, but that we broke with the agricultural revolution when we decided to put ourselves at war with the entire world, that we were going to dominate the planet. Daniel Quinn explains how we've been destroying our planet by breaking this law, and I think that's exactly how, as a species, we got off our continuum. The evolved expectations are in the nature of certainties until they are betrayed, while the learned ones which deviate from them have the negative character of disillusionment and resignation. These responses are continuum protectors in action, but resignation as a result of utter hopelessness serves to numb the original evolutionary healthy expectations. The Secret of Our Success by Joseph Henrich. He explains that what has made us the dominant species on the planet, that has transformed the planet so much, not always for the best, obviously, a chimpanzee actually has a similar amount of raw intelligence for figuring out a puzzle as a human does. But the difference is that humans will actually copy behaviors that do not seem to serve a purpose. The monkey will actually figure out what behaviors do not help solve the puzzle, and it will ignore those in a demonstration, whereas the human will copy all the behaviors. Humans develop culture by copying behaviors even without understanding them. So ironically, it's our ability to blindly follow other people that has caused us to become such a powerful species. If in the natural course of things, resistance to change, as Jean Liedloff explains, is actually a positive part of things, and if settling down and creating a nest somewhere and repeating the same behaviors is actually a good part of creating a healthy culture or a healthy city, as Jane Jacobs explains. And if we are destroying our planet with our current behaviors, as Daniel Quinn explains, and we are the most powerful species on the planet because of our culture and our ability to copy others, as Joseph Henrich explains, what do we do? Do we copy what other people are doing that's destroying the planet? That doesn't seem like a great idea. I think the answer has to come from studying indigenous cultures who never got off the continuum, who continued to follow the law of nature. By looking at indigenous cultures and how they live their lifestyles, I think we can learn a lot about how we can live our lives in accordance with nature. I highly recommend all 4 of these books, and I think if you read them all together, particularly back to back, you're going to have a series of incredible epiphanies that will help you change your behavior in such a way that is constructive for your life as well as for humanity and the planet as a whole. I think the best place to start with creating positive change that really is in accordance with everyone's best interest is for us to all educate ourselves as best as we can. If you haven't read either of these books, I highly recommend them both if that wasn't super obvious. I hope you found this video very thought-provoking. I feel really uplifted by reading these books and thinking about these sorts of concepts. If you feel really uplifted by reading good books or just by listening to me talk, then please subscribe, hit the like button, and we can stay in touch.